There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from being a child in an adult's world, a burden no young shoulders should carry. Today, we're exploring what happens when childhood is stolen, when innocence is replaced with responsibility, and when a child becomes the caretaker instead of the cared for. Picture this: a 7-year-old making dinner for her younger siblings while her mother works a double shift. A 10-year-old translating complex medical information at a hospital because his parents don't speak English. A 12-year-old hiding her family's financial struggles from her friends, calculating which bills can wait another week. These children aren't playing house. They're running it. Psychologists call this phenomenon parentification, a term coined by family therapist Ivan Bosormini-Nagy in the 1960s. It occurs when the roles between parent and child become reversed, and the child is forced to act as a caregiver, mediator, or emotional support system for the family. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. These children often don't realize anything is wrong. They've normalized their reality. They might even feel proud of their capabilities, unaware of what's been taken from them. Dr. Lisa Romano, a childhood trauma specialist, explains it this way. When children are forced into adult roles, they develop a hyper-responsibility that can last a lifetime. They become exceptional at reading rooms, anticipating needs, and managing crises, but they never learn to simply be children. There are two primary forms of this phenomenon. Instrumental parentification involves physical caregiving, cooking, cleaning, managing finances, caring for younger siblings, or even taking care of a sick or disabled parent. The child becomes a miniature adult, handling practical responsibilities far beyond their developmental capacity. Emotional parentification is more subtle but equally damaging. The child becomes the emotional support system for the parent, listening to adult problems, mediating conflicts, or providing comfort during the parent's emotional struggles. They become the therapist, the confidant, the one who keeps everyone else together while falling apart themselves. So how does this happen? How does a child lose their childhood? The pathways are diverse, but the outcome is the same. Family dysfunction, addiction, mental illness, or parental immaturity creates a vacuum that children feel compelled to fill. When the adults can't function, someone has to. Children don't choose this role. They inherit it by necessity. Economic hardship. Poverty doesn't just limit resources, it redistributes responsibility. Children of struggling families often work, manage households, or care for siblings, while parents work multiple jobs. The American Psychological Association found that children in low-income families are 2.5 times more likely to experience parentification. Immigration and cultural displacement. Children of immigrants frequently become language brokers, translating not just words, but entire systems, legal documents, medical appointments, school meetings. They navigate adult complexities while still learning long division. Trauma and loss, the death of a parent, domestic violence, or family separation can thrust children into adult roles overnight. Suddenly, they're not just grieving, they're holding their family together. There's a particularly gendered dimension to this we must address. Eldest daughters, especially in traditional or patriarchal cultures, disproportionately bear this burden. They become surrogate mothers to their siblings, emotional caretakers for their parents, and mediators of family conflict. Psychologist Dr. Kate Balistrieri notes, eldest daughters often develop what we call hyper-responsibility schema. They believe that if they're not constantly anticipating and meeting others' needs, something terrible will happen. This becomes their core identity. The phrase eldest daughter syndrome has resonated with millions on social media because it names an experience that was previously invisible, the unspoken expectation that girls, by virtue of birth order and gender, will sacrifice their own needs for family cohesion. Here's where the science becomes crucial. Growing up too fast doesn't just affect psychology, it literally reshapes the developing brain. Dr. Bruce Perry, a leading child psychiatrist, has extensively researched childhood adversity. His work reveals that chronic stress during formative years alters brain architecture, particularly in three critical areas. The amygdala. This is your brain's alarm system. In children experiencing parentification, it becomes hyperactive, constantly scanning for danger, anticipating problems, preparing for the next crisis. They develop what researchers call hypervigilance. Even in safe environments, their nervous system remains on high alert. A door closing too loudly triggers anxiety. An unexpected schedule change feels catastrophic. Their body never learned what safety actually feels like. The prefrontal cortex. This is your planning and impulse control center. Ironically, while these children seem mature, their prefrontal cortex may actually be underdeveloped in crucial ways. They're making adult decisions before this region has properly matured, leading to what psychologists call pseudo-maturity. They appear competent, but are internally struggling. The hippocampus. This structure processes memories and regulates stress responses. Chronic childhood stress can actually reduce hippocampal volume, making it harder to differentiate past trauma from present safety. This is why adults who grew up too fast often struggle with anxiety and hypervigilance. Their brain is still protecting them from a childhood that's long over. But perhaps most significantly, parentification disrupts normal attachment development. John Bowlby's attachment theory teaches us that children need consistent, reliable caregiving to develop secure attachment patterns. They need to know that adults will protect them, comfort them, and meet their needs. When roles reverse, this security evaporates. The child learns that relationships are transactional. You're valued for what you provide, not for who you are. They develop what's called anxious preoccupied or dismissive avoidant attachment styles, struggling with intimacy and boundaries throughout their lives. Here's the paradox that makes this phenomenon so complicated. Children who grow up too fast often become incredibly capable adults. They're the ones everyone turns to in a crisis. They're resilient, empathetic, and remarkably competent. So was it worth it? Psychiatrist Dr. Gabor Mate speaks about this beautifully. He explains that many adults who experience childhood parentification have genuine gifts, enhanced emotional intelligence, crisis management skills, exceptional empathy, and strong leadership abilities. These aren't fake, they're real competencies developed through real experience. But, and this is critical, these gifts came at a cost. These same individuals often struggle with difficulty receiving help. When you've been the helper your entire life, accepting support feels like weakness, even betrayal. They've internalized the belief that their worth depends on their usefulness. Perpetual exhaustion. They never learned to rest because rest wasn't an option. Even as adults, they feel guilty for downtime, anxious when not productive, fearful of letting others down. Relationship struggles. They choose partners who need saving, recreating the caretaker dynamic they know, or they push away healthy relationships because they've never experienced unconditional love, love that doesn't require constant earning. Chronic perfectionism. When survival depended on getting things right, mistakes became terrifying. They develop crippling perfectionism, unable to tolerate their own humanity. Identity confusion. They don't know who they are outside of what they do for others. Who am I if I'm not needed becomes an existential crisis. Psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes identified imposter syndrome, the persistent belief that you're a fraud despite evidence of competence. This is epidemic among people who grew up too fast. Why? Because their early maturity was a survival adaptation, not authentic development. Deep down, they feel like children pretending to be adults, and they fear being exposed. No amount of achievement quiets this voice because the wound is deeper than accomplishment can reach. So what happens now? If you recognize yourself in this story, if you realize your childhood was spent in servitude rather than play, what comes next? First, and this cannot be overstated, acknowledgement. You must name what happened. I was parentified is a complete sentence and a revolutionary act. For too long, you've minimized, rationalized, or dismissed your experience. Others had it worse. My parents did their best. These things can be true while also acknowledging what happened to you wasn't fair, wasn't right, and left wounds. Psychologist Dr. Alice Miller spent her career studying childhood trauma. Her central thesis, healing begins when we stop defending those who hurt us and start defending the child we were. Therapy modalities like internal family systems, developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, teach us that we can reparent ourselves. We can give our inner child what was missing: permission to be imperfect, permission to need others, permission to rest. This isn't metaphorical self-help fluff. It's neurologically grounded. The brain remains plastic throughout life. You can literally rewire the patterns formed in childhood. Here's what this looks like practically. Setting boundaries. Learning to say no without guilt or lengthy justification. Recognizing that your needs matter as much as others. Redefining productivity. Understanding that your worth isn't measured by output. You're valuable simply because you exist, not because you're useful. Exploring play, yes, as an adult. Engaging in activities purely for joy, not achievement. Dancing badly, drawing poorly, playing without purpose. Reclaiming what was stolen. Therapy and community. Finding a trauma-informed therapist who understands complex childhood experiences. Joining support groups with others who share similar stories. You cannot heal in isolation what was wounded in relationships. Grieving the childhood you didn't have. This is perhaps the hardest part. You must mourn what you lost, the carefree days, the protection, the innocence. Grief isn't weakness. It's honoring what mattered. If you have children or plan to, here's your opportunity to break the cycle. Psychologist Dr. Dan Siegel's research on parenting shows that the single greatest predictor of secure attachment in children isn't having had a perfect childhood yourself. It's having made sense of your own story. When you've processed your own parentification, you won't unconsciously recreate it with your children. You'll let them be children. You'll carry the burden so they don't have to. You'll be the adult you needed. If you grew up too fast, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. You were not mature for your age. You were surviving. Your family didn't function because you held it together. It dysfunctioned despite your heroic efforts. You were not selfish for wanting your own childhood. You were not ungrateful for resenting the burden. You were not weak for breaking under pressure no child should carry. The responsible, capable, endlessly giving person you became? That's real. Those are genuine strengths. But they're also armor. Protection you built because vulnerability wasn't safe. You can keep the strengths while releasing the armor. You can be capable and let others care for you. You can be giving and have boundaries. You can be empathetic and prioritize yourself. Most importantly, you can be loved without earning it. Not for what you do, but for who you are. The work ahead isn't easy. Reparenting yourself means feeling the feelings you suppressed. Setting boundaries means disappointing people. Receiving help means tolerating vulnerability. It will be uncomfortable. But on the other side of that discomfort is something you've never experienced. Freedom. The freedom to be human, flawed, needy, and still worthy. The freedom to rest without guilt. The freedom to discover who you are when you're not performing for survival. You were robbed of childhood, but you don't have to be robbed of the rest of your life. Growing up too fast leaves invisible scars, but scars are proof of survival. And survival, ultimately, can transform into healing. If this video resonated with you, you're not alone. Millions share this experience. And together, we're learning that the child who had to be strong can finally learn to be soft.